What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've heard the legends of the Nintendo Ninjas. They're deployed whenever Nintendo needs something that's in the public taken care of, like a game leak way ahead of the game's release, or maybe a big exploit coming down the hacking community pipeline. Well, it turns out they are real, as we have documentation that leaked out from that big Gigaleak that shows the process of Nintendo finding, approaching, stalking, and even trying to figure out a settlement with a big 3DS hacker that had a serious exploit for that system. And we'll talk about that here today because the process and all the details is some pretty wild stuff there. Also, we're going to talk about an update for the PS5 that solved a seriously annoying issue, and we get to talk about a brand new game console today from KFC. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Fallout 4, Skyrim, the Xbox Series X, and the S. Now, we talked about previously, there is a modification you can do through the mods menu in something like Skyrim that uncaps that 30 frames per second frame rate, which is great unless you're using the Xbox One or the Xbox One X, because it can't get the frame rate up to a solid 60, and instead it's kind of all over the place. So it's actually better to just cap it at that 30 so you have a smoother experience. But now we have the Series X and the Series S where it can hit 60 frames per second, and Digital Foundry did an entire video analyzing this, and I was pretty impressed by the Series S, actually. I kind of expect the Series X to be able to do this. It's the most powerful console right now, and it indeed does that with very minor frame dips depending on what's happening, like fire being shot at you by the dragon, where it will dip into like the high 40s, low 50s, sure. But the Series S at $300 is able to maintain 60 frames per second in Skyrim and Fallout 4. Now, it is using the Xbox One version of the game, so 1080p, not 4K, but still, for a $300 machine, it really does continue to impress me. But either way, if you have a Series X or a Series S, you certainly want to check out this mod. Check out Digital Foundry's video because it was really interesting to see this $300 Series S punch well above its weight class. Also, Microsoft did reveal their Games with Gold for January, and I will give them credit, much better than the past couple of months where I thought, you know what, it might just be time to get rid of Games with Gold. It's very clear a lot of the resources are going to Game Pass, which is their big moneymaker, so I at least understand that. Games with Gold does feel redundant some months when they barely put anything into it, but check this lineup out right here, where we do have Little Nightmares, that's January 1st to the 31st, Dead Rising, January 16th to February 15th, King of Fighters 13, January 1st to January 15th, and then Breakdown, January 16th to the 31st. Now, right away, Dead Rising, if you have not played it, certainly worth checking out. I feel like most of us have played that one. Little Nightmares, also a good one, but interestingly enough, Breakdown is on this list, and you might be wondering why I say that. Well, when I was playing through Cyberpunk, I did mention at one point on Twitter that it reminded me of Breakdown. Like, Breakdown is the game before it was cool to like be able to look down and like see your legs when you're in first person. After that, this was on the original Xbox way back in the day. After that, more and more games started to do that, and this was a game that made you very aware that you were in first person mode. So like when you do a somersault, you would see the camera do that the entire way through first person, and it was interesting because they threw in some narrative parts of the game where it makes you, again, very aware that you are an actual person and not like a spot where the gun is just on a swivel moving around very smoothly. Now, we've seen games like Mirror's Edge do something similar with that, but that was after this, so I would check out Breakdown to see what you think. It's an older game, so it's not, I don't know if it's aged particularly well, but it is interesting to go back and kind of see some of the ideas they had in like the early 2000s. Oh, and a bit of a follow-up to a story yesterday, which had to do with GameStop taking back Cyberpunk 2077 and offering refunds. Kotaku got a hold of the memo itself, and there was a funny little bit in there about GameStop employees having to put a defective sticker on Cyberpunk 2077, and people saw that and said, oh, that makes sense. That's Cyberpunk 2077. Of course it's defective. But real quick, we'll go over this. The defective sticker is basically in place so that it has to go back to the warehouse and you can't really put it back out on the shelf. If Cyberpunk 2077 came back opened, technically, I'm sure they could have done something to put it back out there if they wanted to. I've always wondered this with some of these GameStop games that are opened and they put the little sticker around. It's like, we're sure that's new, right? So no, the defective sticker, while it's funny now to look at it this way, is just so that it does go back to the warehouse. And I'm curious if GameStop came up with a deal with CD Projekt so that they could actually return these games to them, because I mean, CD Projekt's the one who was promising refunds for like PlayStation and other places. So maybe GameStop said, hey, if you want us to take them back, we'll do it, but you gotta give us our money back too. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo ninjas, because what happened the other day online was part of that Gigaleak got out there. It continues to trickle information out. We've seen a lot of stuff, but this one was very unique because what it documented and showed us was that Nintendo had tracked a 3DS hacker who had a pretty severe exploit for the system back in 2013. So this is going back about 7 years, but some of the stuff that was put out there was jarring for a lot of people, because what it showed was Nintendo basically having private investigators and people from Nintendo tracking this person by the name online of Neymod, I'm gonna go with here, for several days. So much so that they had basically staked out their house. They knew where they were going because they had documented them even going to the restaurant by themselves. So they were keeping an eye on who was with them at the time to see who they were meeting up with or contacting or any of this. And yeah, it came off as pretty creepy. Now, I will say, don't be surprised if Microsoft or Sony have files like these, because these are all corporations. And I've said this before, but they're not your friend. They provide entertainment and they take your money. And this exploit, according to Nintendo, was a big deal. So much so that they dedicated a lot of resources to finding Neymod, keeping tabs on them, and even going as far as to be impressed with what they were able to do, that being Neymod, with this 3DS exploit. In fact, as they were approaching Neymod, they had a whole thing set up. And I'm not even kidding, a flowchart. I can't show you any of this stuff because it has confidential stamped all over it. Nintendo is Nintendo when it comes to striking and DMCA and all of that stuff, but they put a lot of time and effort into how they were going to approach this person to make sure that they didn't scare them away or any of that. They seem to want to come to some sort of resolution, whether it be a settlement of some kind, a very large settlement probably, or even hiring them. Check this out. We'll go over to Caitlin here, where it says on Twitter, apparently Neymod from the 3DS hacking scene worked with Nintendo to explain his 3DS exploits and analyze possible solutions. And Nintendo went as far as planning to hire him, attempting to curry favor by giving prototypes and cool hardware samples. Yeah, believe it or not, Nintendo does look at the hacking scene at times as they're pretty good. Can we bring them in? Is that possible? And that was something they did before HackerOne really took off, and now they just leverage HackerOne all the time. In fact, the other day, there was a bounty that was filled with Nintendo for over $12,000 on HackerOne that seemed to leverage, once again, an exploit with the 3DS. Remember that update for SwapNote that showed up and everyone was like, what's this for? There you go. And I will say, from my point of view, this is a bit extreme, kind of over the top, tracking someone for days like this and really having all of these notes put down. It does kind of run up against that line of legality, and are they actually allowed to do this? I'm not even sure myself, because this was going to the extreme. But after all of this went down, Neymod kind of disappeared, it seemed, from the community. In fact, I was able to find some forum posts where they were mentioned as kind of popping in and out of certain chats and running like mod status and stuff here and there, but not really contributing too much even after that. And I did wonder if there were probably two things that happened here. Either Nintendo really did bring them in like this here and they were on for a while and there's an NDA that was in place, or they did actually settle and buy the exploit from them, similar to what happens with HackerOne. In fact, we can see another person who went through something very similar here on Twitter. This is from Hector saying, this approach clearly continued with Neymod in 2013. It seems things had changed sometime between then and when they approached me in 2015. All of my conversations were cordial, starting over email, then phone, and in person. Nobody ever came anywhere near my house as far as I know. So yeah, as far as Hector knows, apparently, if they don't want you to know, you don't know. But going from there, I want to think that they changed their approach at some point, partially due to personnel changes. At least that's the impression I got. I didn't have any direct interactions with Jody, and her LinkedIn says she retired in 2016. Maybe things are better now they were with me. If you're ever offered NDA, this isn't in the EULA, you get to negotiate the terms. The only reason I can talk about this now is I insisted on expiry date and clauses that designate info I had prior and info published through no fault of my own. This leak as out of scope. So an interesting story there, an interesting story with Neymod that was clearly documented by Nintendo. And I guess now the question here is, did Nintendo go too far to try to shut down a 3DS exploit? Well, it's hard to say unless you find out anything from Neymod and what their side of the story is here and really what happened, I guess, at that point. So I guess let me know if that ever popped up online at some point, if we got any more information on that one. But from your point of view, should Nintendo have basically stalked someone for several days, found out as much info as they could, and then approached them at their house to try to buy the exploit or intimidate them through a legal process, which was also an outcome on that flow chart that they put up so nicely. Next up, let's talk about an update for the PlayStation 5 that fixes a really annoying issue. And it's not even like a massive issue, I guess, unless you were playing the PS4 version without realizing it on your brand new PlayStation 5, because that was a thing. People were playing Call of Duty for days without realizing that they were playing the PlayStation 4 version through backwards compatibility rather than the newer PlayStation 5 version. However, now, if you click on the icon on your screen, you'll get this message here that was spotted by Tidux over on Twitter, where it says, confirm game version. You're about to play the PS4 version of this game. Do you want to switch to the PS5 version? And you can see right there, we have an icon to allow us to do so. And what happened before was, for some reason, it defaulted to the PS4 version, which is very weird considering you bought the PS5, you're playing on the PS5, you figure you want to play the PS5 version. Instead, you would have to go down into a sub menu with the 3 dots and tell it to change over to that PS5 setting. It's very weird that this even had to be a thing. Like, you feel like they would have realized that that was kind of an issue playing PS4 games on your brand new system for third-party games, and it really just does show how useful smart delivery is on Microsoft's side. For the Xbox, we don't have to go through any of this. It recognizes the system you're on, it installs the correct assets, and makes sure you're playing the correct version. But at least here, Sony is continuing to update the PS5 going forward to fix some of these little annoyances. Next up, let's talk about some updated sales figures for Cyberpunk 2077. Remember, we heard on launch day that they had 8 million pre-orders and they had immediately made all of the money back from development with this game, and it looks like now they've sold an additional 5 million copies. And this was in a release that they did just the other day. You can see it here over on CD Projekt's website, saying the management board of CD Projekt SA with a registered office in Warsaw hereby announces that based on reports obtained from digital distribution platforms and data collected from physical distributors, it estimates that by 20th December, Inclusive Games have purchased over 13 million copies of Cyberpunk 2077. This figure represents the estimated volume of retail sales across all hardware platforms, factoring in returns submitted by retail clients in brick and mortar, as well as digital storefronts. That's right, this includes the refunds, according to them, as of December 20th. Now, remember, they still had one more day on the refund policy, and that's probably a day that a lot of people went out to return it, but even so, it probably wouldn't make a dent in that 13 million unit mark. And what this tells me is nothing was really learned. If you think about, I mean, look, all this backlash, all this talk online about Cyberpunk 2077, it shouldn't have released in this state. They deceived a bunch of people to get these sales. It still sold 13 million copies. And that tells me that building up a game beyond expectations, the hype levels being at maximum, still works. It'll still sell the game, doesn't matter. Now, we'll see how this continues to go over time. Maybe there are a lot of returns, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near enough to knock that 13 million mark down at all. In fact, I think it'll just continue to sell heavily throughout the holidays. This is selling like a Call of Duty would, or Red Dead Redemption 2 when that dropped and that smashed sales charts. So yes, despite all of the backlash, all the frustrations out there, CD Projekt still made a boatload of money, and they will continue to do so going to next year, because I think their strategy is going to be fix the game, then do their next-gen patches, release the game once again with a PS5 and an Xbox Series box art and all of this for the next-gen definitive edition, and just do a whole nother release and sell it all over again. Yeah, so there you go. It appears as of this time, they're doing perfectly fine despite all of the pushback online. So like I said, not really a lesson learned here. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the latest game console that has been announced, and it's from KFC. I'm not kidding. Now, remember, KFC was kind of alluding to a new game console. I think it's supposed to come out in November or something, and it just didn't happen. It got delayed. And everyone was thinking it was a joke. They're like, oh, KFC's just messing around. They're not going to really do a game console or any of that. Well, they kind of did. No, seriously, take a look at this tweet here. This is from Mark Walden. Sorry, I just laugh whenever I see this. That's PR at Intel. It says, yes, it's real. Yes, it's powered by Intel. And yes, it has a chicken warmer. That last part is not even a joke. They have a full website up right now for this thing, a full trailer up for this thing. It says, introducing the KF KFC Console, KF Console, power your hunger. The KF Console has arrived, forged with the fires of the KFC ovens and built by Cooler Master from the ground up. There has never been a tastier way to experience the latest titles in stunning 4K, 240 FPS, and so interestingly enough, inside of this system, they have the Intel NUC 9 Extreme, so it's a pretty capable machine right off the bat, and it appears to have kind of a slot for hot swappable video cards. I guess you can, after you turn it off, you can pop the video card out, pop a new one in, and they said it has a chicken warmer. It really has a chicken warmer, or at least for meals, if you can fit it in there, where as air circulates through it, of course, you get hot air that goes through, and you can keep your food inside of it. I don't know how well that's gonna work in practice, because I feel like it's gonna get fairly messy depending on what foods you are storing inside of it, but here we are with KFC and their new mini PC game console. There's still a lot of details they have to go over. Pricing, which is probably gonna be outlandish because this is a custom designed system, custom designed case, all of this stuff, and release date. So yeah, still a lot of info out there. I thought it was a joke, but hats off to KFC, they actually came through with it. Also, KFC, if you are watching this, let's do a tech wave. Send it over. We'll open it up here. I'll put some chicken in it or something. It'll be a lot of fun. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Praise the Sun saying, GameStop accepted PS3 Skyrim returns even if they were opened. It crashed like crazy and had a similar save file issue once it got too large. I remember that. A friend of mine had it on the PS3. I got it on the Xbox 360 and played it there, and the frame rate was already bad on the 360, but then I saw the PS3 version. I was like, wow, I got off lucky with 15 frames per second over here. Yeah, the PS3 version, I think would drop to like, I'm not even kidding, 5 frames per second a lot of times. And you're right, there was this bug with save files. I remember they continued to build and build and build and would corrupt and even fill up a good portion of the hard drive. Super broken game. And hey, good to hear that GameStop took it back. I would have returned it too, because I thought the PS3 was gonna die or something when I saw it being played on it. It was struggling so badly. But yeah, a good comparison you can draw there between Cyberpunk and Skyrim on the PS3. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's Nintendo tracking down a 3DS hacker with a serious exploit and going absolutely out of control when it comes to finding them, tracking them, all these different things, making up this wild flow chart for how to respond to what they do. Maybe think about that whole thing. And then what about the KFC console? Are you gonna get one, or do you think it's just all marketing and they're not gonna make enough to really even matter or find one? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.